So just a little additional preamble. So I'm happy to be home. I grew up here in LA. I went to Dorsey High School. I played sports. Did I hear yay for Dorsey? Did I hear that? I grew up in the Crenshaw YMCA. Okay, good. I also, how old is the guy? I also worked at the '84 Olympics. And initially as a 20-something-year-old, worked in the sponsorship area, so raising funds to put on the games. And it's such a reality check to think back to what we were going through then, hoping we would raise enough money to actually pull the games off, to what Renata and her team have done now with the surplus that came to bring us all here today. So I just want to congratulate the foundation on the work it's done with the hard work that everybody from '84 did way back then. So thank you. So we've got three great panelists that get me beyond my reminiscence. And really what we want to do is talk about the communities that they're building. And we want to be kind of the keeping it real panel and talk about the realities of making that happen. And some of those realities will be money, some will be the types of interactions you need to have. But we've got three very different organizations, I think, that will allow us to do a bit of that. So Sarah Cooper from Yalla, San Diego, using soccer to focus on education for both immigrant and refugee communities. Then Brandon Tuohey, who was fortunate enough to serve on the board of his organization for a number of years, PeacePlayers International, that uses basketball to address conflict between communities around the globe. So you can see the kind of the difference there. And then Lawrence is from Street Soccer USA, that using soccer to bring communities together. So the first question I want to ask, just for kind of brief response, is for you to tell us how you do that. Tell us how you bring communities together. I mean, I know that's largely the whole story, but give us the elevator version of that, and we'll go ladies first and hear from Sarah.
Thank you. We do it by actually getting out into the communities, stealing their children.
And who are your communities?
So my community, Yalla, San Diego, actually is focused on a city called El Cajon, out in East County. And that's a big hub for refugees in the area. And so we work with children from kinder through grade 12. We hook them in with soccer. They all know what soccer is. I call it football. They call it football too, but we're in the USA now, so we'll call it soccer. And they will know how to play soccer because that's what they did wherever they were, you know. So we catch them with the soccer, and then we sit their butts in a chair and help them with English, math, and other forms of education. Okay, so
it's the capture by virtue of come play the sport, and then we hook you and have the conversations we need to have.
We get them in, and we also engage with their families and the local community, businesses, and so on. And
move them towards higher levels of education.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about some more. So Brendan, how's it work in terms of in conflict areas? What communities are we going to? Maybe give a couple of examples, and then how do you bring groups that may often be literally fighting together?
Yeah, most of our work up to this year was internationally in areas that are divided by race, ethnicity, religion, economics, and how the programs are delivered vary by the environments that we're in. So right now we've got offices in Belfast, in Jerusalem, in Durban, South Africa, and Cyprus. So again, the delivery is a little bit different, but there's some constant pillars that we live by, and we believe that if you're really trying to move from getting somebody to see someone as an object or hate them or dislike them for some reason, to seeing them as a human being and building friendship and relationships and real attitude and behavior change, these programs, number one, need to be year-round and consistent. They can't be one-off events or happen a few times, even multi-year. They've got to be owned and led by people in the communities rather than being flown in from people from the outside. There's got to be a leadership pipeline, so kids go from playing to serving as assistant coaches and peer mentors to actually coaching and staffing the programs. And then finally, kids come for the sport. So if you're there selling it as a peace program or a reconciliation program, they're not going to come and they're not going to come back. So we really pride ourselves on making the basketball, though we do some other sports right now, but primarily it's been basketball, the strongest basketball programs in the areas, and also integrated into the local basketball structure. So our kids play on mixed teams and leagues. They're often good, even though the goal isn't to make necessarily the best athlete.
Right.
But again, if kids aren't getting better and not feeling like they're not on an equal playing field or feeling like they're can win, again, it's hard to keep them. So we're able to really integrate ourselves into the mainstream basketball culture.
So Lawrence, street soccer, you got the gear on.
I'll brand it up or whatever. It's amazing. These two organizations are amazing, and also always interesting to see us arrive at the same sort of conclusions. I think you do this work, the same sort of things do work. The specific story of Street Soccer USA, we actually started out working at a homeless center. And what we looked at the issue of homelessness as a symptom of the breakdown of community. So really, building a community, not that there's a problem with the person, but a problem with the context, change the context, create a team, an environment where they can flourish. So we really surrounded folks with teammates, with mentors at homeless centers. And that program really grew, but we looked at the core of what we do was this community building.
And help people start off with adult homeless people?
These are homeless teens and young adults, absolutely. And we looked at the core of what we did and where these folks were coming from. They're coming from neighborhoods. So we started building community clubs in low-income neighborhoods. So we still have this special outreach for homeless adults, but by and far, the vast majority of what we do is youth services. So community clubs that are front-end engagement through sports, back-end social service coordination, connecting kids to opportunities. So that's the model. We work in schools. We have a real community neighborhood focus. So rather than scaling an after-school program broadly, we're focused in the communities around where our clubs are.
Okay, now I asked you guys how you do this. Now, somebody might have answered that question with the money answer. I mean, because how you do it really is dependent upon funding. Why don't you each talk about how you do this? How do you get funded to do what you do? Sarah?
Okay, well, we do it in spite of not getting funded.
Which goes back to our first panel today,
yes.
that sometimes that's what it takes.
Getting funded takes a lot of funding. You have to have the energy and the people to seek the funding. We have benefited in the past from LA84 funding, and we've put that to good use. But our main plank is, again, back to the community. We work with volunteers, and most of the people who we pay now to work for us started as volunteers. We work with the universities to get interns, so we take advantage of as much free labor. And as Brendan was saying, we train up the kids so that they move into coaching roles and refereeing roles. So building a community where some people will get paid, yes, and we will be seeking funding to pay for the things that we have to spend money on, but having those connections to the actual people is the thing that's the glue that keeps us together.
So Brendan, you've had quite a journey with funding. I've sat on board with you, as I mentioned, and I've heard some insights personally about funding. Why don't you talk about, maybe if you'd be interested to hear some of the stages of how you've addressed it.
Well, it's funny that Benita just spoke. Laureus was our first real partner. And I can remember where my brother and I founded PeacePlayers in 2000, so we've been around for about 17 years. But in I think it was our second or third year, we're in South Africa. We had grown way too quick. We had no money. We'd asked everybody that we knew. We kind of ran out of people. And we're having this conversation of, we're failing. We're going to have to close. And that same week, we had a call from Laureus's foundation in South Africa with a grant request we had submitted probably a year before. Saying, yeah, you got it. So funding to support your coaches for the next 3 years, and here we are. But I think what we're most proud of, and I go back to that local ownership piece, is if you go to I'm sure that both these organizations can say the same thing, but if you go to the communities that we operate in, people, number one, they own it, and they feel like they do. And so for us, and it's different types of challenges, but our 4 kind of year-round programs internationally are now all funded from local sources. So from government, from foundations, from corporate and
Which was the goal. I mean, it hasn't.
That was the goal. And again, it's not easy. But again, I think the fact that in these places that people from there are taking it on and are funding it also shows the value they perceive in it.
Lawrence, how about you?
Yeah, I would say, we ended up with a funding model that is like a third private philanthropy, money we raise, a third government funding, and a third earned revenue. So the earned revenue piece was a real game changer for us, because suddenly, when I was going and making a philanthropic pitch and asking, someone from that community or even outside the community to invest in that community, I wasn't asking them to do anything I wasn't already doing myself. I was putting $1 up that they were matching. How do we do that? We took a risk. It's not for every organization, but we run adult leagues and take all the profits from that business. We probably run, in San Francisco, we probably run the biggest soccer-only adult amateur league, and take all that money from public land, from public parks that we rent, and put it back into programs to fund after-school programs and community programs. We also run these street soccer cups, so we leveraged our relationships with the city where we were providing great programs, and we got, first it was Times Square, the city held a permit for us, so we executed a big corporate-sponsored, corporate registrations. Of course, we had a youth showcase and adult showcase for our participants. We run these big tournaments that generate revenue that then become part of the local funding model. So now we have these tournaments in Philadelphia, in New York City, San Francisco, Union Square, San Francisco, and we're bringing the event here to LA. So the other piece, the local piece, getting local electeds engaged in our effort, delivering on their objectives is super critical, because that ties you into the community. And if you're going into, those are, a lot of times the vision for success is that it's locally run. I mean, has to be. But it's often me walking into somewhere that I haven't been before, and it's their house. And so getting those local officials engaged is critical. And so we're really thrilled, here in Los Angeles, working with LA84, helped us engage the city council here to launch here with that support from Herb Wesson, council president's office, LA84 Foundation, and to have folks like the Galaxy and LAFC wanting to host our event. We're able to put those operations that we know that we've run other places, put them in place here, so we know that when we begin, we have processes in place that will generate sustainable revenue. And our commitment to the communities has to be long-term. If we start somewhere and leave, you leave people lower than when you began. So, we kind of take that approach that it's always long-term. We approach every relationship like that.
Well, let me ask all three a different version of the same question, which I think people that are in enterprises now, in organizations now, or thinking about organizations, have to contemplate this at some point, and that really is the community that you serve, and making a decision to go more broadly or not. I mean, you decided to go beyond Charlotte. I mean, what brought that decision on? I mean, you could have lived happily ever after in one place.
And I would have loved it, but a lot of times it's just being clear-eyed and dealing, the hand you're dealt. And the reality was we were given a gift. We got a lot of publicity for our program. People were coming from all over saying, hey, how do you do this? We want to do it. We didn't have any money, so we got $10,000 from Bank of America and gave some plane tickets to organizations that wanted to partner with us. They came to Charlotte. We put a training weekend on where the actual program participants led the training, and that was the genesis of an 8-city network. And we had a New York Times front page story. It almost sunk us because we just couldn't deal with the interest level. So we kind of had this national footprint and had to make hay out of it. And at the end of the day, when we said, hey, the success is locally driven programs, we want to build and create more of those. So that's kind of how we set ourselves up. And that was the strategy. I mean, that is our strategy, to take these efficiencies that we learn, roll them up centrally, and distribute them so that we can deliver free, programs in communities that logistically or economically, it's just not possible to access the benefits of team sports. So that's our business strategy, is to roll up those costs and have a broader base. And so we try to make the best out of that strategy. It's a little different than,
Brennan, you took a completely different approach. You started off globally, and then you're back in the U.S. I mean, how did that decision happen? And then you talked a little bit about it, but how have you now decided to come back to the U.S.? And then also specifically LA, so you might want to talk about that too.
So, I mean, obviously, we live in a pretty divided country. That's become, I think we've all become more aware of that recently. And for several years, we talked through, what are we going to do in the U.S.? How do we take kind of what we felt as a unique skill set, and what issue would we build it around? And we got brought in post-Ferguson in Kansas City, working with the Kansas City Police and the Kansas City Police Athletic League, helping to train coaches and develop curriculum and collaborate around strategy. And after being there for a few months, we felt, wow, this is an area where we feel like, number one, it's really important. This is a problem that we face, and this is something where there don't seem to be a whole lot of people in terms of using sports to help build relationships between police and community, as well as just uniting community in general. So from there, we started talking through just internally, hey, we think this is a program that we should build. And we went out to a couple people and talked through it and did a couple smaller pilot programs, but we're very fortunate to begin discussions with Nike. And last January, Martin Luther King Day, we were part of their equality campaign launch, which has led to us starting programs in Baltimore, and Brooklyn, and Detroit this past June, as well as LA, Chicago, and Memphis in the near future. Again, with the goal of using sports to unite community with law enforcement being a key. So it was an idea that we had, we knew we wanted to do. We did a little bit of testing, but we were very fortunate to have a partner like Nike to come in. And there's been many parts about this relationship, but I think what they saw is you can't rush this. You can't just show up and say, we're here, we know what we're doing. They were able to work with us on a plan around building capacity so that we can manage this. And Lawrence just talked about, you don't want to start something and then you abandon. What he's doing and what we're doing, you're asking people to take pretty significant risks. So if you're not with them for the long term, don't even start it. So the support from Nike's really been around, all right, how do you build the capacity to do this well, to set up an infrastructure that enables these, to go slow, but then to really grow faster once you know what you're doing and able to collaborate with other partners. So again, we're still learning, we're still early on this, but we feel like it's obviously an issue that's going to continue to be here, and we believe it can be of some assistance.
So Sarah, you've been around, y'all have been around long enough to have had the pressure to expand beyond San Diego. How have you responded to that? What contemplation?
I want to be these guys when I grow up, but at the moment we're still having to really focus in. We're making, as you said, we're making a really long-term commitment. So we're talking about kids who've come here having a break in their education and having no home, being in a camp. They get here and we make a commitment to them. We want them to get through to college, and that can be a long time. So we're focusing in on that community, but also really trying to understand the process in a very analytical way and collect all of the data that we can to make sure that we know what the model is before thinking about scale or spreading out or sharing. We want to know exactly how we do what we do, getting down to the details.
So back to, and that's a very good lead in to thinking about fundraising and being able to show what you've done. I guess both kind of the best story that you can tell fundraisers, but also when they want to see something more data-driven, as we talked about earlier, what kinds of things do you have? So the story and how do you compile whatever data you might have? Lawrence?
Yeah, sure. So I think at the end of the day, a lot of us arrive at the same sort of conclusions, what sort of data. So we do social emotional learning, life skills, leadership stuff, pre and post surveys. So we have all that data. I would say for us, the important thing has been the discipline of data collection on the staff side. So we have a Salesforce database and really hammering home that is how important it is to staff, because you're always involved with the individual and the personal story, but making sure that staff, just the discipline of taking in the data and collecting it that was a 1.5-year process for us to get that right, and then you can do then you can look at everything in a different way.
And did you have some guidance with that? I mean, is there a best practice? If you Google on the web and you look for the form of here's the data you need to collect to convince a fundraiser that you're doing this the right way.
Well, okay, so the way we looked at it is we said, hey, we feel like we're experts in community building and relationship building, so we work with some universities to do a qualitative study. Based on the conclusions of the qualitative study, we designed some instruments for the quantitative part, and then we implemented the system. It took a while. Yeah.
It sounds like more money again, but yeah,
we do. Yeah, we some money. I mean, to do we end up. The first conversation was with Research Triangle Institute about a randomized controlled study that budget was like $700,000, and I knew that.
So that wasn't the right study for you.
So that never happened.
All right. So Brendan, I know part of your journey too. Why don't you talk about how you went through that and what you've done in terms of having the best ways to measure, and having a board in some ways that demands that kind of response.
No, it's been a really wonderful evolution. We actually have an M&E team now. So we have people whose full-time job it is working on measurement, evaluation, data capturing. There is no one answer, I don't think. I think M&E it's around data collection. It's around measuring for us. Attitude change, behavior change. What are you making happen that wasn't happening before? Friendship formation. I would say we've got really good data around all those. So around, in all of our sites around, what kids thought coming in, what they think after a year, after 2 years, how it compares to control groups. I think, things that were not happening before that are not now happening now. Like, for example, we have in Northern Ireland the big 3 sports organizations, soccer, Gaelic Athletic, and rugby, bought into this, and actually we're working with them around integrating their participant base countrywide. So again, kids are playing that would never been playing before. But again, and then the anecdote, the storytelling. So it's how do you weave all of those together? You mentioned randomized control trial. We're in the 4th year of a 7-year study funded out of United States Institute of Peace. And we'll have some really good information. This is the first of its kind in around sports and peace building. It's actually seeking to measure, all right, how does this impact behavior? And I'll just give one quick anecdote around that, because the studies in Israel and the West Bank. And in 2015, we have an under 18 girls team out of Jerusalem. So it's mixed of, it's 5 Israelis and 5 Palestinians. Before PeacePlayers started, Arab Palestinian kids had never been in the league before. And it had all been all Israelis. So it took 5 or 6 years to get it up, to get especially the Palestinian kids good enough where they could play. And again, lots of challenges along the way, but we have this great video. We're in the championship game. Our team is playing an all-Israeli team. And girl 2, we're down 1, she gets the rebound, she scores the basket. You can't design this better, right? Makes the basket as the buzzer sounds, and you see all of the bench, the parents, Palestinian and Israeli parents going nuts, right? You see these girls, jumping on her, and they gather at half court, and their arms around each other, jumping up and down, celebrating obviously the championship, but more importantly, like what it means. I mean, Israelis and Palestinians can't really do anything together in Israel, and the fact that these girls together just won a championship. And so I would say, if anybody asked me, all right, prove what you're doing works, I say, all right, watch this. And I would just say, thank you. Lastly, you can't do that in any other platform than sport. You wouldn't see that experience, those friendships, that joy, and the publicity people are witnessing in anything else in sports.
But Sarah, I know you get pushback from that. People still say, "Yeah, I'll give you some money, but show me some numbers."
Right.
How have you dealt with that?
We've been fortunate to both make partnerships with local universities, find the departments that are looking at the stuff that you're doing and offer them your, numbers and have them do an analysis for you. But we've also made good partnerships with companies that are bringing out platforms. So SportUp, I believe one of the guys from SportUp's here, they've given us a platform called UpMetrics. And each of my coaches can put the attendance in on the phone, and then the demographics comes out, and I can pull out attendance, demographics, but also social science-based questions that the kids answer at regular points. So it's very technology-driven, the way we collect our data. And then, just putting the effort into collecting teams that will sit and do the analysis. That's the hard part. You can collect all the data you want,
do it, yeah.
but unless you're interpreting it in a way that's meaningful to both the funders and also to the communities, then it's
part of doing the work, though. It's a part that has to be done. So we just got about a minute left. So I want each of you just real quickly, one big takeaway for people thinking about how to better engage with communities. What do you want to make sure you convey as we go away today? I mean, what has worked for you that you want to make sure everybody out here hears?
Making real connections to actual people. I'm giving an example of one of my soccer girls' mom. She doesn't speak English. She won't drive on the freeway. I get in the car so that I can drive her car to take her to the places we need to go. We can't talk to one another, but we love each other. We just have so much in common, even though we can't articulate that. And I think the real relationships with real people, that's something I've heard again and again today.
I would say that the power of collaboration and partnership. I mean, there's lots of great organizations in this room, but we're only touching a minuscule number of kids that need it. And obviously there's the kind of competition around funding and the like, but the only way we're really going to move the needle is if we collaborate and work together.
Lawrence, close us out with the greatest thought of the day.
No, I mean,
Pressure.
No pressure there. No, but listen, similarly, we've learned a lot, we've distilled a lot of that knowledge, we have templates, models we roll out, but at the end of the day, our value is responsiveness. The point of this is to make the programs work in the community, and I would never want to, as an organization, drive some agenda that misses that point. So when we come, we're building from the bottom up, that's our approach, and if you aren't responsive, if you aren't flexible, then the programs aren't going to work in the community. Every community is a little different. So that has to be the perspective. And to Brendan's point, that's the first thing we do is take a long time to do diligence just in one neighborhood to see what is actually happening. How are the organizations there already working together? Where is our value at? How do we take what's there and lift it up? Because it's a big problem that takes collective solutions. So I would say bottom up is my great thought of the day.
That's great.
That's a great thought. Let's thank our panelists for these great insights.